It's one of the most iconic westerns ever made. But behind the dusty gunfights and epic standoffs of the good, the bad, and the ugly lies a story even wilder than what we saw on screen. A film where actors narrowly escaped death, bridges exploded for real, and a musical score built around Coyote Howell's changed cinema forever. From Eli Wallach's terrifying, near-fatal accidents to Ennio Morricone's genius use of whips, voices, and ocarinas, the making of Sergio Leone's masterpiece was pure chaos and pure brilliance. So saddle up as we head back to the 1960s, into the golden age of spaghetti westerns, and uncover 15 weird facts most fans never noticed about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Fact 1. The story was made up on the spot. In the mid-1960s, director Sergio Leone and writer Luciano Vincenzoni had already struck gold with A Fistful of Dollars and For a Few Dollars More, both starring Clint Eastwood as the mysterious man with no name. When United Artists, the studio behind the James Bond films, showed interest in distributing the two hits and asked for a third, there was just one problem. There was no third movie. Thinking fast, Vincenzoni improvised right there in the meeting, pitching a story about three men in the Civil War hunting for buried gold. The executives loved it, and in that instant, the title popped into his head: The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And just like that, a Western legend was born. Fact 2. Clint Eastwood needed convincing. Clint Eastwood might be the ultimate face of the spaghetti Western, but he wasn't exactly rushing to make a third one. He felt the good, the bad, and the ugly gave too much screen time to Tuco and Angel Eyes, joking that if it went any further, he'd be starring with the entire cavalry. Still, he knew his worth. Eastwood demanded a higher salary, forcing Sergio Leone and his wife to fly to California to negotiate. After 2 days, they struck a deal: $250,000, 10% of the profits, and a brand new Ferrari. Leone wasn't thrilled, but looking back, it was a bargain for a legend in the making. Fact 3. Orson Welles tried to talk them out of it. Once United Artists signed on and Sergio Leone was set to direct, everything seemed ready to roll. Except not everyone thought it was a good idea. Legendary filmmaker Orson Welles warned Leone against making the movie, insisting that Civil War films were box office poison. Welles pointed out that most movies set in that era failed financially, but Leone didn't care. Determined to capture the war's grim reality, he used Matthew Brady's haunting Civil War photographs as inspiration, giving the film its stark, unforgettable look. Fact 4. Rejected script ideas. Screenwriter Luciano Vincenzoni once said that all three main characters reflected parts of Sergio Leone's own personality. While developing the script, Leone wanted more humor and brought in Italian comedy duo Age and Scarpelli, but he ended up rejecting their work, calling it the grossest depiction of my life. Vincenzoni finished the script in just 11 days before quitting over creative clashes. In early drafts, Eastwood's character was still called Joe, and Angel Eyes was named Banjo, until Eastwood started using the nickname that stuck. The film was first titled Two Magnificent Tramps, before being changed last minute to The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, a name that would become legendary. Fact 5. Casting the bad and the ugly. For the ugly, Sergio Leone chose Eli Wallach, best known for The Magnificent Seven and How the West Was Won. Wallach brought humor and chaos to Tuco, shaping him after a character he'd played before, and turning him into one of cinema's most memorable outlaws. Finding the bad proved tougher. Leone first wanted Enrico Maria Salerno, who had dubbed Eastwood's voice in the Italian releases, then approached Charles Bronson, who was busy filming The Dirty Dozen. Finally, Leone cast Lee Van Cleef, flipping his noble image from For a Few Dollars More into the ruthless, calculating Angel Eyes. And it was perfect. Fact 6. Filming. Although backed by United Artists, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly was entirely an Italian production, filmed at Cinecittà Studios in Rome and on rugged locations across Spain, including Burgos, Almería, and Madrid. The shoot was as dangerous as it was ambitious. A bridge explosion had to be filmed twice after the first blast destroyed all 3 cameras. Meanwhile, Eli Wallach, Tuco, nearly died 3 separate times. Once from drinking acid he mistook for soda, once when his horse bolted during a hanging scene, and once when a train missed him by inches. He later joked that Leone had a very relaxed attitude toward safety. Leone didn't speak English and relied on an interpreter, adding to the chaos. Still, he and Wallach shared a dark sense of humor, even if it almost killed the actor. The same couldn't be said for his tense relationship with Eastwood. Fact 7. Translation blunders. When the trailer for The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly first came out, it made a pretty big mistake. It labeled Angel Eyes as the ugly and Tuco as the bad. The mix-up was due to a translation error, but it confused the very idea the movie was built around. The English version also suffered from awkward dubbing. Sergio Leone didn't film with synchronized sound because he preferred to play Ennio Morricone's score on set to set the mood, which meant the dialogue often didn't match the actor's lips. Still, it only added to the film's unique style. As for Morricone's score, inspired by the howl of a coyote, it became one of the most iconic soundtracks in film history, even reaching number 4 on the Billboard charts and staying there for an entire year. Fact 8. The end of a working relationship. Sergio Leone was a perfectionist to the core, obsessed with every camera angle, every shadow, every frame. His fiery temper and endless retakes eventually wore Clint Eastwood down. Eastwood even nicknamed him Yosemite Sam because of his explosive personality. By the end of filming, Eastwood had made up his mind he wouldn't work with Leone again. When the director later flew to California to offer him the lead in Once Upon a Time in the West, 1968, Eastwood turned it down. The role went instead to Charles Bronson, who had earlier passed on The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Leone didn't take it well, later calling Eastwood a block of marble who sleepwalks through movies. A bitter ending to one of cinema's greatest partnerships. Fact 9. The Good, the Bad, and the Critics. When The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly premiered in late 1967, it was heavily trimmed for US and UK audiences, nearly 30 minutes shorter than Sergio Leone's original 177-minute cut. Still, it became a massive hit, earning $39 million on a $1.2 million budget. Critics, however, weren't so kind. Many slammed it for its violence, while others dismissed spaghetti westerns as cheap and lowbrow. The Los Angeles Times even mocked it as the bad, the dull, and the interminable. What they didn't realize was that Leone's film was decades ahead of its time, a stylish, operatic satire of American violence that would later inspire directors like Quentin Tarantino. Today, it's celebrated as one of the greatest films ever made. Fact 10. The sets still exist. By the late 70s, the spaghetti western era had faded, giving way to Star Wars and sci-fi epics. But The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly left behind more than just memories. Many of its original sets still stand in the deserts of Almería, Spain, weathered and silent reminders of a golden age of filmmaking. Even the film's famous graveyard was later rebuilt to honor its legacy. And Clint Eastwood's iconic poncho? It now hangs in a California restaurant, a fitting tribute to a masterpiece that refuses to fade. Fact 11. Eli Wallach nearly died. Filming The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly was almost as dangerous for Eli Wallach as life in the Wild West. The actor behind Tuco survived 3 near-death experiences on set, all due to poor safety conditions. First, he accidentally drank acid that a crew member had poured into a soda bottle, mistaking it for his drink. Later, during a hanging scene, his horse bolted while his hands were tied, dragging him nearly a mile before stopping. And in the train scene, he narrowly avoided being decapitated. not realizing the train's iron steps passed just inches above his head. Somehow, Wallach walked away from it all, and still delivered one of the greatest performances in Western history. Fact 12. The bridge exploded twice. One of the costliest mishaps during filming came when the bridge explosion scene had to be shot twice, thanks to a simple but disastrous mix-up. The Spanish army had built a full-sized, functional bridge and rigged it with real explosives, waiting for Sergio Leone's signal, the word VI, meaning go in Italian. But before cameras were ready, another crew member casually used the same word over the radio. The army captain, who didn't speak Italian, thought it was the cue and detonated the bridge early, while no cameras were rolling. Leone was furious, but the Spanish captain made it right, offering to rebuild the entire bridge. Once reconstructed, the explosion was filmed again, this time perfectly. Fact 13. Sergio Leone spoke no English. Despite directing one of the most iconic American westerns ever made, Sergio Leone didn't speak a word of English. During filming, he had to rely entirely on translators to communicate with Clint Eastwood and Lee Van Cleef, which made the process slow and often frustrating. However, Eli Wallach, Tuco, found a unique connection with the director. Both spoke a bit of French. That shared language allowed them to talk directly, exchange ideas, and even argue without translators. Their easy communication helped shape Tuco into one of the film's most complex and unforgettable characters. Fact 14. The title order creates confusion. The title we know today wasn't Sergio Leone's original choice. In Italian, the film was called Il Buono, Il Brutto, Il Cattivo, which literally means the good, the ugly, the bad. The order made sense in Italian, reflecting how the characters appear in the story. When United Artists prepared the U.S. release, they flipped the order to the good, the bad, and the ugly because it sounded smoother in English. The studio even considered other titles like River of Dollars and The Man with No Name before settling on the version we know. Ironically, the confusion didn't stop there. The American trailer accidentally labeled Angel Eyes as the ugly and Tuco as the bad. In the end, the title that stuck was more about marketing rhythm than Leone's original intent. Fact 15. Morricone's coyote call trick. The haunting howl that opens the good, the bad, and the ugly isn't a real coyote. It's two men singing. Composer Ennio Morricone wanted a sound that captured the wild, animalistic spirit of the frontier, so he experimented with human voices instead of instruments. He had one singer hold the vowel A and another sing E, both in falsetto. When layered together, the result mimicked a coyote's lonely cry echoing across the desert. The effect was so convincing that audiences believed it was real, and it went on to become one of the most iconic sounds in film history. And there you have it, the hidden stories, near misses, and strange details that made The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly one of the most fascinating films ever created. From Eli Wallach's terrifying on-set accidents to Ennio Morricone's coyote call genius, this Western was as unpredictable behind the camera as it was on screen. Which of these weird facts surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more untold stories and behind-the-scenes secrets from the greatest films in movie history.